Inside is good, right? Well, what I thought would be a simple question eventually evolved into a daunting one. Why is that? Well, the gameplay. It kind of plays itself. Okay, that may not be entirely true. There are occasional timing puzzles sprinkled throughout the game requiring some level of thought. Aside from an occasional puzzle here and there, most of the time you can pretty much move forward and succeed. This was only 4 minutes into my playthrough, which was enough to cause concern, but its presentation, atmosphere and mysteries had distracted me enough to press on. But it was only a matter of time for things to fall apart, as the game slowly focused on mindless puzzles, and the few timing puzzles were plagued by save point systems so forgiving it might as well have a skip level button. So this must mean I hate Inside, right? Well, no. I actually really like this game. A game that could be best described as an almost zero player experience. Why is that? To best explain where Inside manages to succeed and make me like the game against all odds, I need to point to a similar experience I had recently that everyone is seemingly in love with, and I can barely stand. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade should have been the complete package for me. A narrative-focused 3D action-adventure game about the tremendous weight grief holds over the mentally ill, wrapped up in a Norse god setting. There are honestly few things that interest me more, and they somehow completely butcher it. How? Well, there's a couple of reasons, but let's start with this. Hellblade is not an action-adventure game, it is a walking simulator with combat sections in it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of successful walking simulators deserving of the praise. The issue is that the combat feels both incredibly weak and sluggish. The animations themselves are expertly done, but enemy AI is predictable, and those beautiful animations are repeated so often that after the first few encounters it just becomes tedious. Some of you may be thinking, if it's a walking simulator, then isn't that the focus? And yeah, that's a legitimate point, except when you realize the walking simulator portion of the game is often handicapped by invisible walls in every step. And as you progress further into the game, those tedious but rare combat encounters become far worse than the norm. And this brings me back to Inside, and what makes it so compelling compared to a game like Senua, which arguably has more gameplay to its game. Inside excels in the three fundamentals I expect from a game that plays itself: presentation, execution, and pacing. Playdead seems to have an if it ain't broke don't fix it mentality when it comes to their games, as the controls on what you can do are near identical in Inside to Limbo. You can only run, jump and grab objects. There isn't even a sprint button. You just move faster when the game chooses you can, and it does feel like your hand is being held the entire time. Maybe thematically fitting, but gameplay wise it leaves a lot to be desired in complexity. However, it often makes up for this lack of game with incredible polish in presentation and execution. Very much like Limbo, Inside has no dialogue. It's drenched in black and white and relies solely on visual storytelling, leaving much to our imagination. Its cartoony art style, muted color palette, and odd enemies should be enough to rid it of its tension, but it's so internally consistent that it both adds to its charm and horror. You could say it brings you inside the chaos. I'll see myself up. So whilst Inside doesn't excel in its gameplay, it masters the feeling of being a young kid in a dystopian nightmare through visuals alone, and it sticks to that. Hellblade, on the other hand, tries to be an action game without any complexity. It tries to be an adventure game with one strict path. It tries to be a puzzle game with bad puzzles. And finally, it tries to be a walking simulator and kind of succeeds, but is ashamed of it. So I have to ask, what does it do well? Well, most say the story. I get that there were many touched by Senua's story, as she acts as a near silent vessel for us to project our own feelings on, and she works well in that role, but they also want Senua to be her own character, and I really struggle to care much at all. So much of the game is just her screaming in agony as increasingly more terrible things happen to her. And of course, it's tragic, it's upsetting and miserable, but it's also boring, because they haven't written a character, they've written a punching bag. It reminds me of how The Legend of Korra heightened the brutality of the action scenes to compensate for writing an unlikable protagonist. The difference here is that Senua isn't unlikable, because she has very few traits to have an opinion on. Her sacrifice only has meaning if we understand who she is and what she stands for, but we know nothing. And it's partly by design, to show the hold grief and mental illness has on her, but it also makes for a really uninteresting protagonist. So when these traumatic events are happening, I'm not thinking about how much pain she must be going through. I'm thinking, why is this so loud? And I'm not going to act like Inside's story is some sort of masterpiece like many have claimed, but I am going to compliment it for one big point that makes Hellblade such a tiresome slog: pacing. Inside is short and sweet. You can complete the game in just around 2 hours playing leisurely. There is no filler from beginning to end. Hellblade, on the other hand, is around 8 hours long, and I felt like it had overstayed its welcome 4 hours in. There is no calm before the storm in this game. Except that's not true. There is one, the beginning. And from then on, it takes no moment to let Senua breathe for us to connect to her, because it's more interested in keeping everything a mystery for the sake of being mysterious, only for it to end with a country pop song? Game? Hello? Anybody? This feels familiar. No, not that one.
This should help you remember.
Yeah. HBO. Why? Hellblade's length isn't the root of its issues, but it spotlights and exaggerates the problem with the game each hour I played, and I only stuck with it because I wanted to see if it would make up for all the problems I had with the game, and well, that happened. This may come as a surprise to you, but I am actually excited for Hellblade's sequel, because I do appreciate the innovation. I just don't find any charm in its countless amount of failures. But with Inside, it feels like the flaws it does have are minor to the overall structure and theme of the game, as it feels so polished and honest to what it is. So with that being said, I feel confident enough to answer my question at the beginning. Yes, Inside is good. But it doesn't end with a country pop song, so 2 out of 10, play dead, do better next time.